Today's session is on hazardous substances. This session will provide you with the training required by this facility's hazard communication policy and procedures. Later, your supervisor will provide you with a department-specific training regarding hazardous substances and chemicals. After these training sessions, you will be prepared to work safely with potentially hazardous substances you may encounter in the workplace. Although this is a mandatory OSHA requirement, it is also our commitment to provide you with a safe working environment. You will receive handouts that include a document that verifies you've received this training. This document needs to be completed and handed in at the end of the session. We will be talking about HAZCOM, which means hazard communication. Hazard communication is the process that we use to give you information about chemicals in the workplace that could cause you harm. It is your right as an employee to have this type of training. We want you to know what hazardous chemicals are in the workplace and to understand the potential hazards or danger. You will learn what measures are available to prevent any accidents or injuries from occurring. We will discuss the chemical inventory and the MSDS binder, as well as personal protective equipment, or PPE, and where you can find them. By the end of this general session, you will know how to read a material safety data sheet or safety data sheet, and how to locate them in your community, how to ensure each chemical has a proper label, and your responsibility for reporting an unlabeled container. You will learn what personal protective equipment is provided for your safety and how to use it, and what actions need to be taken in the event of an emergency. In short, you'll have the background to be ready for department-specific training. You will receive department-specific training before you begin work. During that training, you will learn the names and hazards of any chemical used in your department. You will learn what personal protective equipment must be used and when. You'll learn how to safely handle hazardous substances during your job duties, meaning what precautions to take and what procedures to follow. You will be asked to sign another form that documents the department-specific training. 5-Star Quality Care has developed a specific hazard communication policy and training program to protect all our employees and residents against any potentially hazardous chemical. It is our goal to protect you, our employees, when you are required to use any chemicals as part of your job. In addition, 5-Star is committed to selecting the least hazardous but still effective chemical, to providing education, training, and to provide personal protective equipment. The 5-Star policy meets the OSHA requirements of a formal hazard communication program and training. So how does the program work? Hazard communication, or HAZCOM, is a shared responsibility of the chemical manufacturers, 5-Star, and you, the employees who work with the chemicals. The chemical manufacturers tell us about the chemicals by providing labels and safety data sheets based on uniform criteria of classification. The clearly marked chemicals are then shipped to 5-Star. The labeled containers and safety data sheets are sent to 5-Star with the chemicals. We prepare a written hazard communication program including a list of the hazardous chemicals in the workplace, and we implement that program. You, the workers, are trained on the program, the hazards, and protective measures. You work carefully with the labeled containers of chemicals using protective measures with the current safety data sheets available. The hazard communication program became even more effective with the 2012 OSHA changes and regulations that adopted the Globally Harmonized System, or GHS. This means that all chemical manufacturers in the world use the same information for chemical categories, labels, and safety data sheets. The regulations will be in effect in December of 2015. All hazardous chemicals in this facility have been identified and listed on a hazardous chemical inventory list. This inventory is kept in the front of the safety data sheet binder. From this list, you can see what chemicals are used in the area where you work. For every chemical on the inventory, the government requires that the facility keep a material safety data sheet, or MSDS. Soon this will be called a safety data sheet, or SDS. These sheets contain very important information to ensure safety. You should know where these are kept and how to read them. You may be called upon to read them in case of an emergency. You should also be aware of the information that they hold. They will tell us how to identify the chemical, the health hazards if exposed to the chemical, symptoms of exposure, how to store the chemical, and how to protect yourself when using it or in case of a spill. The revised HAZCOM standard requires that the safety data sheet will always be in a 16-section format as shown here. The sections will always be in the same order with the same heading. For example, first aid measures will always be in section 4. Handling and storage will always be in section 7. This will make it easier to find the information you are looking for. Items of the most interest to employees and emergency responders are at the beginning of the document, while more technical information is presented in later sections. The sections that you should be familiar with are highlighted here. Section 1, the identification of the substance or mixture and of the supplier. Section 2, hazards. Section 4, first aid measures. Section 7, handling and storage. And Section 8, exposure controls and personal protection, or how you protect yourself. The chemical inventory and safety data sheets must be kept current. No one can bring any chemical into the building unless there is a safety data sheet available and provided to the department head. When any new chemical is introduced, the department head will obtain and review the safety data sheets for new and significant health and safety information. Then the department head will see that any new information is passed on to employees that may be working with that chemical, and also pass it on to the person responsible for maintaining the hazardous chemical inventory and the SDS binder. The MSDS binder contains the safety data sheets on all hazardous chemicals found on site. Once again, no chemicals should be brought on site without notifying the person in charge of HAZCOM. Ask your trainer who this person is in your building. 5-Star has established a uniform format for the MSDS binder so that it will look the same throughout our company. This will assist those who work in several communities. The MSDS binder must be clearly labeled and kept in this order. First, the hazardous chemical inventory list, followed by alphabetical tabs where the MSDS sheets are filed by product name. Next, there is a tab behind which is filed the 5-Star HAZCOM policy. The use of department safety data sheet binders is discouraged as they are difficult to maintain. The complete safety data sheet binder will be copied for each area of the community. Be sure you know where the binders are kept in your community. As you work with chemicals, always check the label on the container. The container label must be able to be read and contain the following information. With the 2012 changes in the regulations, labels will look like this. First, you will see a product name. This will match the name on the safety data sheet. Next, you'll see health and physical hazard warnings that are shown as icons called pictograms. We'll talk about those more in a moment. A signal word, which will either be danger or warning. Danger tells us this chemical is a more severe hazard than warning. Then a hazard statement, which clearly describes what harm can come from being exposed to this chemical. Next, there will be a precautionary statement, which contains instructions for storage and handling and use of personal protective equipment. Lastly, it will be required that the responsible party's contact information is provided. With the new standard, labels will require pictograms that have red borders with a picture inside the diamond. Here you see 9 pictograms. The flame is used on flammable chemicals. An exclamation mark indicates health effects such as skin and eye irritation. The gas cylinder indicates gases under pressure, and corrosion indicates skin corrosion or burns, eye damage, and corrosive to metals, and so forth. Please look through these pictograms and be familiar with them. Many chemicals used in our facilities are potentially hazardous if not used correctly. It is important to know the health hazards and symptoms that may result from exposure to these chemicals. You will learn more about the specific chemicals in your department, but let's discuss a few categories of chemicals that are found in our facilities. First, let's look at corrosives. An example of a corrosive is bleach, and it may cause chemical burns if in contact with skin, eyes, or airways. Another group of chemicals are called solvents, such as degreasers, and these may present an explosion hazard or a fire hazard, and they may also cause irritation if they come in contact with eyes and skin. Lastly, we have compressed gases on site, such as oxygen, and these may accelerate the spread of fire. It is the department head's responsibility to ensure proper labeling of all hazardous chemicals in the workplace. You will not be required to work with hazardous chemicals which are not properly labeled. If you find any container that is not labeled, remove the container from use and bring it to your supervisor. We have established policies and procedures to make your workplace safe. We ask that you take an active role in protecting yourself and others from any potentially hazardous chemicals. Know and follow the policies and procedures and report anything you believe to be unsafe to your supervisor. As you perform your job, be sure to read the labels on all containers before using them. Know when PPE is mandatory and use it correctly. For instance, know which type of gloves to wear, which type of eye protection is needed. Know how to store the chemicals you use and what to do in case of an exposure or a spill. Always notify your supervisor in case of a spill and an exposure, and be sure the spill is cleaned up safely. If you note a coworker not using proper protection, notify your supervisor. Remember, we're all dependent on each other for safety. It is your responsibility to know where to find these items in your building. Take a moment to discuss with your trainer where you would find them. Locate the HAZCOM policy, the chemical inventory list, the MSDS binder, and eye wash stations. Next, it's time to practice reading the safety data sheets. Looking at the samples data sheet that you've been given, find which sections contain the product name, the manufacturer, what the health hazards are, what first aid should be given if you have an exposure, how to handle and store the chemicals, and what PPE needs to be worn. For safety data sheets under the 2012 standard, the sections are as follows. Section 1 will have both the product name and the manufacturer information. Health hazards will be found in Section 2, first aid in Section 4, handling and storage in Section 7, and PPE in Section 8. In summary, we want you to be safe. Please help us to maintain a safe workplace by following the policies and procedures and reporting anything you believe to be unsafe to your supervisor or the manager on duty. You will be scheduled shortly to receive department-specific training on hazardous chemicals, telling you how to protect yourself and respond to hazards. Be sure to ask your supervisor questions if something is unclear to you. It's now time to complete the HazCom training form you've been given. The top section asks for information about you and the topics that have been covered, and the second half is a quiz to test your knowledge of HazCom. Please complete this now, and it will be collected from you and to be filed in your folder. Please don't hesitate to ask your trainer any questions that you may have, and thank you for working safely.